A refugee is a person who is at risk of harm or persecution in their own country. They've fled to another country and been offered protection there. The difference between a refugee and an asylum seeker is that an asylum seeker is simply someone who is saying they're a refugee and needs to have their claim to be a refugee proven.
The main reason people seek asylum in other countries or seek refuge is because there'll be a war in their country where they're born. They'll be forced to leave their homes because of that war, and because of, maybe they're targeted because they're part of a sort of political group or a specific race, and they'll have no choice but to pack up and leave.
I left Sri Lanka in 2010. We fled the country because we want to live our life with peacefully and happy with freedom.
I believe the church is playing a really key role in this situation.
In those days we were treated in a bad way. I was arrested a few times on suspicion and tortured. So after I was released first time, it was so difficult to go to sleep, every time my nightmares, I couldn't sleep.
So there's two ways that you can come to Australia as a refugee. You can be processed offshore, and that means going to a refugee camp in a place like maybe Malaysia or Thailand, and showing the UN, the United Nations, that you're a genuine refugee, and then eventually you may be resettled in Australia.
It's not like the first in and they just go on a waiting list. Countries choose who they want.
The other way that you can come to Australia as a refugee is to turn up as an asylum seeker, even though they're doing that in ways that otherwise would be unlawful. The UN Convention provides a legitimate way to do that.
I had to fled Sri Lanka to survive. First I went to India. I heard about that the boats are coming to Australia, so I found someone else and they helped me to get in the boat. It took 19 days in the sea to reach Christmas Island, and it was a very terrible journey and horrible. Can't imagine. I don't want to think about it.
So behind me is the back of the Melbourne Immigration Transit Accommodation, otherwise known as MITA. At different times it's been home to up to 300 asylum seekers and refugees while they're waiting to be processed. We've seen and journeyed with many people who've come through here. Some have come out into the community, but a number of the people we've journeyed with are still here, and they've been here and in other detention centres in Australia for now 6 years. They don't know how long they're going to be held in detention. It's a situation for them that leaves them in limbo.
We got into the boat in the middle of night, and we were sent back to inside the engine room and the other rooms, and we spent about one and a half days inside, and when we passed the Indian border or something, we allowed to come outside. I think the 10th or 11th day we ran out all the water and beach always, and everyone got scared. We thought we were going to die in the middle of the sea.
Before, in Australia, politicians responded to issues as they arose. In 2001, things shifted. What happened was we began to see that we could use this issue of asylum seekers for political gain. We began to create an ecology of unwelcome toward refugees and asylum seekers. In the federal election of 2013, people were describing it as a race to the bottom over who could treat asylum seekers the harshest.
The Australian government paid for an advertising campaign in Indonesia where we say it's against their religion to help people smugglers, and there are most of those villages where people disembark from they're practicing Muslims, and we're messing with their spirituality by saying things like that. One of the interesting things is that fishermen have this code that you always help someone at sea who's sinking, because it could be you one day. So these Indonesian fishermen are being told that that's not what you should do.
After a couple of 4 days, and we met Indonesian fishing boat, and they started giving everything. How they realized they came near us and started throwing biscuits, water, and everything. It's amazing. Yeah, it was amazing.
In Australia, I guess we've tried to do things which sound good, like stop the boats. We want to stop people dying at sea, which no one wants to see people dying at sea. But we cannot do that through means that are fundamentally unjust. We can't reach a good outcome by locking innocent people up with no prospect of release. We can't achieve a good outcome by putting people in situations where they're vulnerable to sexual assault. We can't put kids we can't keep kids in detention and knowing the damage that it causes them, and I think that we'll achieve a good outcome from doing this. One of the really strong themes that comes through in the Old Testament is God's concern for the foreigner, God's concern for those who come to Israel in need of protection. Exodus 23 verse 9 says, "Do not oppress a foreigner. You yourselves know how it feels to be a foreigner, because you were foreigners in Egypt." Israel was unique in the ancient Near East for having laws around just treatment for foreigners. No other country, no other state had these kinds of laws. Israel was unique.
Then after 3.5 days, we reached Christmas Island. Yeah, and then I was sent to the detention center, Christmas Island. I had been there for five months. Then I was transferred to Reed Park, North Queensland. I've been there for 12 or 13 months. Then I was granted a bridging visa. My claim was rejected a couple of times, and finally I got the PR in 2013.
I think the church's call is to begin to make an alternative, to create an ecology of welcome for perhaps we could respond with hospitality. Perhaps we could respond by seeking justice for the most vulnerable. And I think the church can be a wonderful alternative to what we see too often around us.
I believe the church is playing a really key role in this situation, because not only are they making friends with refugees and welcoming people into their homes, helping them with day-to-day things like understanding gas bills and stuff like that. I've seen so much of that, and it's beautiful. It's like what we were made for, really. Not only that, but we've been engaging in the political kind of arena as well, and I'm so excited about all the protests that have been happening, peaceful protests where we're just standing up and saying, actually, no, this is not right. And what would Jesus do in this situation?
I started my life here as a cleaner. Now I'm working as a caseworker in an asylum seeker program.
If you walk down Lygon Street, or you go to an Afghani restaurant in Dandenong, you can see what a wonderful contribution over many years that refugee people have made to this country. And I know that Australia is a great place because of it.